us now on the Megacast is U.S. Representative Andy Levin, representing Michigan's 9th Congressional District and seeking the Democratic nomination by way of primary election vote for Michigan's newly drawn 11th Congressional District. For reference, we have reached out to the Haley Stevens campaign on the Democratic side as well, and we'll reach out to Republicans running in the 11th District in spirit of equal time this primary season. Representative Levin, appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, Tyler, it's great to be with you.
Good to have you on. So recently, a lot has been going on in Washington, D.C., particularly a lot of action from the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, on June 24th, they made a historic decision overturning Roe versus Wade in another decision, of course, down the line. You attended a rally on the day of in protest of that decision that is affecting so many lives here in Michigan and across the U.S. Give us your thoughts, on the day of that decision and your continued thoughts now in some of the rhetoric that's also been said and other action that's been taken from the Supreme Court since June 24th.
Well, I'm furious, Tyler. I mean, the idea of taking away women's control over their own bodies and their own decisions that they've had constitutionally for 50 years, it's outrageous, it's wrong, and we're going to fight back tooth and nail. That morning, I demonstrated with colleagues at the Supreme Court. When I flew home, I went out to Ferndale and demonstrated there. And then Beaumont and Spectrum made the announcement that day that they were going to stop providing abortion services because of the 1931 law. Here, I said, no, there's an injunction against that law. I called the CEO and said, you've got to follow the law as it is right now. And within 24 hours, thankfully, they reversed themselves and they continue to provide the whatever necessary abortion services they were providing before. So we've got to continue to battle to protect the rights of everybody who can get pregnant and have a baby to make their own decisions right on through.
Representative Levin, there's been a lot of talk in recent years and in the past when the topic of Roe versus Wade potentially being overturned by the Supreme Court came into discussion, certainly after recent nominations to the Supreme Court during the Trump administration that gave a conservatively nominated majority on the Supreme Court, even though it is supposed to be a nonpartisan branch of the government. That being said, as we discuss the potential of codifying the Roe versus Wade into law, there seems to be also some discussion too, some confusion with those in the general public. They may not understand what that would do to provide these services or provide the allowance of these services to people who can get pregnant throughout the U.S., thinking, well, if they overturn Roe versus Wade, couldn't the Supreme Court declare that this law is also unconstitutional? Take us through what codifying Roe versus Wade would mean for those that can get pregnant in the U.S. and particularly on this issue of abortion.
Yes. Well, so what the Supreme Court did was say there's no right in the Constitution itself to access abortion care. Certainly Congress can pass as many laws to do things that aren't guaranteed in the Constitution. So we have already voted to pass the Women's Health Protection Act through the House, and we need the Senate to pass it, and that would codify Roe v. Wade. It would put it into law so that even if this Supreme Court wrongfully says it's not a constitutional right, anyway, it would become a right in statute, in the law of the land nationally. At the same time, we need to fight here in Michigan so that I'm just thrilled that the Michigan Reproductive Freedom for All ballot initiative just announced that we got the most signatures ever for any ballot initiative. And that would put the freedom to access abortion care into the Michigan Constitution so that here in Michigan, at least, it would be there as a right, as a fundamental right that no legislature can take away. Basically, your question is such a great one. If the Constitution gives you something, no legislation can touch it. But if the Constitution is silent, as the Supreme Court says, the federal government or states can still pass statutes that give you those rights. And that's what we need to do in Congress. And meanwhile, we need to try to amend our Constitution here in Michigan to give us that right in this state.
We're joined by U.S. Representative Andy Levin, representing Michigan's 9th Congressional District at this time, and is currently running a Democratic primary to represent Michigan's newly drawn 11th Congressional District. He'll be running in the primary election on the Democratic side of the ballot in August against Representative Haley Stevens, also currently an incumbent in the U.S. House of Representatives. We have reached out to her campaign as well in the spirit of equal time between candidates. Representative Levin, going back onto the Roe versus Wade issue and the continued discussion about potentially codifying Roe versus Wade into the constitutional law federally, there is a Democratic majority in the Senate at this time. However, there are some obstructions that are in place that would make passing this legislation you discussed that would codify Roe versus Wade difficult to get through the Senate. How important is it for the Democratic Party, which seems to be leading the charge to codify Roe versus Wade, to overcome those obstructions, particularly the filibuster, in order to get this into law, especially considering that the midterm elections are coming up, and those could also have a significant impact on your party's ability to pass this legislation?
Right. Well, my view is that the midterm elections are going to be a big wake-up call for America, and people are going to come out in droves to defend our rights and elect Democrats up and down the ballot, because we are the ones who vote to protect reproductive freedom. And it's not about, people can be for abortion, against abortion. It's not like that. We're a secular democracy where nobody's religion or views is supposed to determine what someone else can do. And that's all my position is, leave it up to each woman and her doctor, each person who can get pregnant and their doctor. So codifying Roe v. Wade is super important. We don't even have 50 senators, we don't have all 50 Democratic senators who are for this right now. I believe Senator Manchin is not. So we need to elect more Democrats to the Senate. And we absolutely need to get rid of the filibuster over there. And I've said that from way before this issue, Tyler, because the filibuster is a vestige of Jim Crow. It was put there just to prevent Black people from becoming full equal citizens of the United States. That's all it was used for most of its history. And it is stopping the Senate from doing the people's business. The founding fathers didn't want to let minorities, a minority rule in the Senate and block progress. Right now, as long as you have 41 people in the Senate, you can stop almost any bill from happening. And that's why the Senate isn't acting on giving workers the freedom to form unions and raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour and, passing the Equality Act to protect the rights of all LGBTQ people and so many other things that we need to get done for the people of this country. So we got to get rid of the filibuster over there. But having a 50-50 Senate just doesn't cut it. We've got to elect more Democrats in the Senate so we can get the people's business done, because even with getting rid of the filibuster, if one or two people aren't with you, you can't pass something. And so we need a bigger margin over there.
We're joined by U.S. Representative Andy Levin, representing Michigan's 9th Congressional District at this time, and is running in the primary election this August to represent Michigan's newly drawn 11th Congressional District as well. Representative Levin, 6 weeks ago, of course, we had the tragic school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, at an elementary school. Of course, over the holiday weekend, another mass shooting, which is just one of many in the last several weeks, this time in Highland Park, just outside of Chicago in Illinois. Can you talk to us about some legislation that you're working on, including the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act? This would enhance background checks for prospective gun owners under the age of 21. Also would extend the time period from 3 days to 10 days, allowing law enforcement to do initial mental health and juvenile criminal records, as well as other background checks as well. Can you talk about this legislation, where it's at in the process, and some of the other details other than what I've just previewed that this would do to help address the gun violence issue in the U.S.?
Yes, well, I'm happy to say that the Senate has finally passed some basic, some of the narrowest sensible gun reform legislation, and the president has signed it. So we have passed these regulations to subject 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to more stringent background checks, to deal with ghost guns, to do more mental health work, to encourage states to pass red flag laws. But we need to do much, much more, Tyler. After the Oxford shooting, I wrote the Protect Children Through Safe Gun Ownership Act. It would regulate minors having access to handguns, making sure there's parental supervision. It would require safe storage and of guns and ammunition in homes. And it would provide funds for school systems to do age-appropriate education for parents and kids on keeping kids safe from guns. And that my new legislation has been backed by all the major sensible gun reform groups and by both teachers unions because of the educational provisions. We have to do much, much more. We have to ban assault weapons. We have to make background checks completely universal. We have to get rid of these high capacity magazines completely. America has a big problem here, Tyler. You can't put it off on mental health. You can't put it off on other things. We have way, way more deaths by guns than any other country. It's not like 20% more or 50% more or twice as much. It's 3 and 5 and 10 and 20 times as many. So you mentioned how many mass shootings there were and homicides just over July 4th weekend. You know how many there have been in the United Kingdom this whole year? 4 gun homicides the whole year in the United Kingdom, when we have 5 times that many deaths by gun every day in the United States. So we've got to do more. It's a public health epidemic, really. And it's not about the Second Amendment, because people can have a right to have guns, but we need to, if you have to have so much regulation and training and everything to drive a car, it makes sense to have just sensible restrictions and requirements about gun ownership, so we can stem this horrifying death toll. Tyler, now being killed by guns is the #1 cause of death of children in this country. I mean, that's just completely unacceptable and unnecessary.
We're joined by U.S. Representative Andy Levin on the Michigan Megacast. He's currently the representative of the 9th Congressional District in the state of Michigan. He's running for re-election, this time in a new district, the 11th Congressional District, where he is running in the Democratic primary against current U.S. Representative Haley Stevens. They'll be competing against each other in the primary for the Democratic side of the ballot coming up in August. I do want to address that too, Representative Levin. First of all, what are your thoughts on the new maps here in Michigan, and what led you to decide that you're going to run in the 11th Congressional District, especially given that another representative is also running in that district, who's also in your party and is also currently in Congress?
Yes, well, so, we don't have any control over the maps. I'm glad we passed this voters not politician thing to get the partisanship out of it. So they drew these maps, and there was no question for me that I would run in the new 11th, because that's where I live. My house is smack dab in the middle of it. Mary and I, my wife and I, have lived there for 16 years. And we've raised all 4 of our kids there. I grew up in Berkeley. That's in the new 11th district. My dad lives in Royal Oak in the new 11th district. His mom was born in Birmingham in 1898 in the new 11th district. So, really, my kids are the 5th generation of my family to live here. And everybody that I represent almost in Oakland County is in the new 11th district. So it was a real no-brainer. It's unfortunate to be in a Democratic primary, but you know what? I'm running on my record. I'm running as the progressive, as the principled candidate, as the pragmatic candidate who's gotten a lot done in Congress. And I'll let the people, choose us instead of us trying to choose our voters. I don't really believe in that. And this is a democracy. So let the people decide. And I'm all good with it.
We're joined by U.S. Representative Andy Levin, currently representing the 9th Congressional District, representing Michigan in the U.S. Congress. He is running for the 11th Congressional District in the state of Michigan in the Democratic primary coming up in August. He'll be going up against also current U.S. Representative Haley Stevens. I want to give you some opportunity, Representative Levin, before we wrap up here. This past April, you introduced the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act in Congress that would repeal certain exemptions in the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, that are restricting overtime for truck drivers. Can you talk about that legislation, where that is at, and how that would benefit truckers, especially at this time with the supply chain issues continuing to be what they are, and trucking being even more important now than it has been before, when it still has been vital to our economy?
Absolutely. This would benefit truckers, but it would also benefit all of us in multiple ways, Tyler. It's a great example of my bipartisan work in Congress. This is the lead co-sponsor is Jeff Van Drew, a Republican from New Jersey. So this is amazing. The over-the-road truckers have been exempted from overtime pay. They have not gotten overtime pay for the whole history of the Fair Labor Standards Act since the 1930s. And so it gives companies an incentive to try to work truckers overtime. That makes their lives miserable, and it keeps pay suppressed, and it's not fair to them. And so the turnover in trucking is incredible. There's not enough truck drivers, and it contributes to these supply chain problems. And so by ending the exemption, putting overtime pay back there for truck drivers, we would, first of all, truck drivers would have a better life. They'd make more money, and they'd have more reasonable hours. Secondly, we would reduce turnover and have more, veteran truck drivers staying with the profession. We would ease the supply chain problems by having an adequate supply of truckers. But Tyler, there's a whole nother benefit that I didn't even realize when I started on this. It would improve safety and save lives, because it turns out, it's not that surprising, that new truck drivers in their first year are involved in many, many more accidents than more veteran truck drivers. So you cut turnover and you save lives. And that's why all the major trucking safety groups have backed this legislation, because, they've lost a loved one to an accident when some super tired trucker fell asleep and crossed over and killed got in a crash. I mean, we really can improve safety and the supply chain problem and the lives of truckers by passing the Guaranteed Overtime for Truckers Act. So we've introduced it. It's gaining a lot of momentum, and I'm pushing for a hearing on it as soon as possible.
Representative Levin, appreciate your time. Anything else for us before we let you go today?
No, Tyler, that's it. I'm just so happy to be, running in Oakland County, where I'm from, in this new 11th district. And I encourage everybody to get out and vote. And this is our democracy, and we've seen how fragile it is. So everybody participate, because there's not, above any given issue of policy, is saving our democracy. And getting out and voting is one way you can do your part. Thanks, Tyler.